Sound, music, sustainability. Welcome to Sustain FM. What does it mean to give voice to nature, to the weather? How can we connect with ecological systems through sound and performance? And what does it mean to attune to nature? Today, I'm excited to explore these questions and more. Juan C. Duarte Regino is an artist researcher, currently a Ph.D. candidate at Aalto University. And central to his investigation is the relation between atmosphere, the act of listening, and the profound concept of attunement. His background is in new media, design and production, and audiovisual communication, and his mission looks beyond conventional extractive or deterministic approaches to understanding the relationship between nature and technology. Instead, it ventures into ancient and indigenous knowledge that harmonizes with ecological perspectives on our weather systems, giving voice to the natural agencies at play within the realm of weather. So as you can imagine, Juan is a perfect fit for this show. So welcome, Juan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. It's really a pleasure, and I'm really glad for the invitation and to share about my research in your in this Sustain series, which I find also very very enriching to have a dialogue with a parallel research and practices we have in common. So I'm really excited about this.
Cool, great, yeah. Thanks for that. And so I have about 1 million questions, but maybe just to kind of get started, one of the things I think there's some similarities and differences between our profiles, but I think one of the things that's maybe a similarity is you're a sound artist, you're a researcher, you're an artistic researcher, and I'm curious how those pieces fit together for you. So are those sort of separate threads that combine, or is it more that these are just different aspects or perspectives of describing your work? I'm curious how you see yourself kind of, because in some ways you could say those are exactly the same, and you could also say they're actually quite radically different. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I think that in my career in the sound art field, I've been led into a sort of practitioner researcher position where theory and practice are rather mixed. No, one is leading the other. Sometimes the other one is feeding back. It's a kind of like symbiotic relation. And I think working in sound, as you may well know, it requires an interdisciplinary approach that it's complementing each other, and it's important to have this kind of dialogue between sciences and arts. And in particular, I think I'm interested in how sound can be a medium to understand complex phenomena in both the physical and the affective dimensions. And I think that's kind of like an opportunity for us working in sound, in the different practices and research, to kind of like get our hands into different ways of knowledge and different ways of interacting with the very complex spectrum of sound.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and it kind of, that's that idea of connection and engagement with complex phenomena. It's actually a great lead into one of the other things I wanted to ask about, because you shared with me one of your recent papers, and there was a lot of interesting things there, but one of the things I was curious about was what you were talking about, senses and perception. And I'll just read one of the sentences from your paper. So in the paper you say, "My investigation extends beyond listening to audible events and various sensory stimuli related to the atmosphere. It delves into phenomena that surpass human perception, necessitating instruments to mediate the experience." So there's a lot in there that's kind of related to what you were saying, but I'm curious there, what is it about instruments, about sound, that kind of lends itself to that mediation and perception of those complex phenomena?
Absolutely. Well, I see that what I mean sometimes as instruments in this practice research, I often use this term as an analogy to talk about extension of our senses, so a kind of like prosthetic enhancement of our bodies. And I believe like music, or let's say sound practices, even the sound recorder, the microphones, and different ways of transducing signals of the environment into the audible spectrum
Mm-hmm.
is a way to kind of like underline our human intention.
Mm.
It is quite often the performing these technologies, instruments, kind of like everyday communication task.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how would be possible to think about sound instruments as weather sensors in this case that I'm working with in my practice, in my research, how these sensors could work as a way to listen beyond our human intent,
Mm.
how they can enable us to perceive what we don't really know yet and
Mm-hmm.
what we would like to become aware of.
Mm.
And in that sense, I think it's really important to kind of think about phenomena, complex phenomena like the weather or climate change that are not only is not kind of like a simple task to measure, right? They require a complex system of sensors and databases and ways of compressing all this data information into an experience. And I think sound,
Mm.
that's the ideal medium to experience that.
Interesting. Okay, so that's very interesting. So then that's an interesting sort of interpretation, or maybe different sort of, because if I think about sort of like the standard definition, like when I hear the word instrument, what comes to mind is a piano is an instrument, a guitar is an instrument, a flute is an instrument. But if I'm understanding you properly, you're actually thinking about the sensors and the different ways, and sort of instruments as more ways of extending understanding and perception. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. I think that well, this kind of genealogy or let's say historical understanding of instruments in the acoustical dimension, and if we think, for example, these digital based instruments, synthesizers, computers,
Mm-hmm.
and all these kind of like pervasive devices that we have at reach in our times. I think they perform quite often the role of instrumental mediation, and I think how we can kind of connect them in a system, how these translations occur, how these transformations between data and sound, they work as well as a kind of like larger instrument, and the way we kind of use these different, let's say, electronical synthesizers, it works as a complex instrument that is not just reducing an experience of, let's say, kind of a guitar that requires can it speak or can be working in or express certain ways of being, but I believe instruments can be also take the form of a digital informatic system as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. So maybe kind of, I think something kind of related to that. One of the pieces that I saw is that you performed was the closing of the Gifts Presence conference, and there I'm curious. So you've just been talking a few minutes ago about the systems and instruments as kind of mediation, but I'm curious. So it's that conference, that event was about this idea of gifts and giving and presence. So do you see that? That a gift or the act of giving, is that also a form of mediation?
Right. I think, yeah, I mean, in this kind of like conference exhibition, my colleague and I, my colleague called Yari Cojo, we tried to create a sonic experience that would be able to give a gift to the audience. So
Mm-hmm.
we prepared this kind of interactive installation that referred to an Asian instrument called the tubo cocleato.
Mm-hmm.
It's an instrument invented or a speculative instrument by it's a kind of like a polymath inventor called Athanasius Kircher, who kind of thought about different ways of creating resonance to the weather. And in particular, this kind of instrument was a sort of like amplifier and thinking about different ways of resonating with the room. So with the room or different architectural spaces. So in this installation performance, we had like an opportunity to think about how could be a way to resonate with the weather using data, using the acoustics of the space? What kind of frequencies can create this kind of translation, this kind of mediation, let's say, across the outside and the inside, the weather that is, let's say, happening outside, and the weather that is inside of our room, that the air that we're breathing and the exchange that we have, how these kind of mediations could be kind of like a gift to become aware of these different complex exchanges or phenomena. So, yeah.
Interesting. You were talking just before we heard the excerpt there about this connection and the what I interpreted almost as a gift of awareness, which brings up another thing that I wanted to connect to, that the word or the concept of attunement is a thread that runs through much of your work, sometimes more directly, but I think also maybe subliminally is not the right word, but it sort of runs through a number of different pieces of your work. So when I hear that word, what first comes to mind is attention, with perhaps maybe the added element of focus or connection. Is that what you mean by attunement, or is it that plus something else, or a different interpretation?
I think that the concept of attunement became quite central in my recent work when thinking about ways of becoming aware to weather and climate change. And I believe that attunement can be quite key to precisely investigate phenomena that are like beyond our focused attention and our intent. Perhaps we are not aware of, let's say, how the climate change operates in a global scale and how this is transforming in a slow process over decades, centuries, and so on. And I understand also attunement kind of as a way to have a middle point where we can have a focused attention on objects and to the process that are surrounding us. Let's say the weather, how it's changing, or how this climate is also becoming something that is breathable or more perceptible. The color of the sky, the pollution that we have around us, the changes in our behavior. I guess like attunement can be used in different fields and can become, or it is already, I perceive, like preferred in different disciplines as a kind of like a in between or process oriented way of becoming aware of different phenomena.
That's fascinating. So one of the questions I had related to that, so one of your pieces is attuning to the dawn chorus. And so obviously, so attunement is actually in the word there. And one of the things I was very curious about that performance, or maybe, so your work in general, but maybe focusing specifically on that piece, is that, so attuning to the dawn chorus, is that about you as a composer, as a performer attuning? Or is it about the audience attuning, or to the phenomena, or the audience attuning to you, or is it kind of a combination of those? I'm curious how that concept of attunement sort of that could be kind of maybe implemented is not quite the right word, but that could show up in different forms in the same piece.
Right. Well, I can give also like some kind of background to this work in particular. There's this phenomena, the dawn chorus, quite often referred in the soundscape recordings field, like as this kind of singing of birds in the early morning, the early hours of the day. But I've been also growing interested in this kind of electromagnetic spectrum, natural radio signals, which appear at the very similar time of the early morning, and which is this kind of whistlers and different kind of atmospheric signals that can be transduced into the audible spectrum. They're like either really high and imperceptible to our ear, and therefore, I mean, this is something also that I kind of exploit in a way in my own research. Kind of like the concept of attunement is for me as well kind of like tuning into like a radio.
Okay.
You know, kind of like a deciphering some kind of like a encoded message. And as we are tuning into a radio to find a signal, a radio station that we want to hear, I believe we could think about also like these kind of signals in nature that are potentially revealed. And as this research is ongoing, it's kind of like a work in progress. I was using pre-existing recordings of people who recorded this event with antennas and custom systems. There was a person who I believe I used a recording from someone who's using a tree as an antenna, recording as a kind of like a at this time. And I found it really interesting how we can use like also, well, let's say natural environments or agency of these organisms, the trees, to extend our technologies and to extend also our listening, and to perhaps also clarify our relation to other beings, to birds, to the earth itself.
So you mentioned okay, yeah, this is yeah. I want to explore about a million different directions here, but just to kind of narrow in on one. So you mentioned there a couple of points. So you mentioned the idea of an encoded deciphering an encoded message in nature, and you also mentioned this idea of the agency of organisms. And that leads me to a question, sort of this idea of the environmental voice. In your piece, you talk about giving the weather a voice. And in my own work, I've explored this in various ways of giving plants a voice, giving the future a voice, giving different groups of people a voice. And I have my own ideas about what that means. But I'm curious, what does giving weather a voice mean for you? And is that different than being aware of the weather? Because those are kind of different connotations. Giving something a voice implies that thing has agency. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yes. I believe that the voice is more than language and an intended message. And when we are, for example, experimenting with this kind of translations of biosignals or biochemical processes translated into audible expression, I think it's important to highlight that giving a voice is not giving words to or creating a message out of that, but it's more about the expression, the material expression of an independent entity. Perhaps I believe that giving a voice to, let's say, the natural forces or these organic entities, it's perhaps a way of also becoming more aware and becoming, in a way, not like anthropomorphizing them. No, it's not like again going into the. I guess it's kind of like a fault or a bias or a human bias to kind of like define nature in our terms, but perhaps it works the other way to kind of like become more familiar or how other entities express and how through these ongoing experiments there's I think like a very rich field and ongoing explorations that can give us more and more evidence and materialities to become aware of them.
That's fascinating. So you mentioned the ongoing experiments, and I did want to ask you about the piece that you've been developing, the Ogori. I hope I got the pronunciation of that right. And I think one of the things that's interesting, kind of connecting back to what you just said there around avoiding the I can never say this word properly, anthropomorphizing those phenomena around voice, but it's also around ideas of time and existence. Certainly, sort of in Western European cultures, linear time, we understand time, and even from human perception, we actually kind of have a difficult time. I use that same word. It's hard for us to sort of judge these longer term shifts. And I'm curious how, because you talked a little bit about, for example, like weather versus climate and the difference in time scales there. I was wondering if you'd talk a little bit about how these different ideas of time connect into these ongoing experiments that you're working with.
Absolutely. I think that perhaps this, let's say in Auguri, we have this, I mean, the Auguri is in a way also kind of like another kind of part of my work, which is focused on divinatory practices and how perhaps these methods of divination through sensing with animals, in this case, observing birds or reading the sky through different natural registers. In ancient times were kind of like there were reliable proofs or empirical knowledge to think about future conditions or how the weather would be in the foreseeable future. And I think when on one side, it's important to kind of like recognize the time we have here and now. I think there's this author, Jordan Durham Peters, who talks about the time of the kairos, which is kind of like the sensibility sometimes a hunter has, no, to perceive the precise moment and the conditions that are surrounding us, no, to become aware of what kind of like being very sharply focused in through our body, and how others kind of interact within our environment. And the other time, it's the chronological time, the chronos, and perhaps that's more related to the climate, no? How we can think about this time that just goes into vast linear time trajectory. And perhaps I think that with these divination practices, we kind of think about going back into this circular time, cyclical time, and kind of like reveal these agencies of nature, and find ways that are not too perhaps catastrophic or pessimistic, and being open to possibilities to deal with the climate crisis, with different topics that are of course on the table and are quite relevant. And I guess through these explorations of non-Western, let's say, or perhaps non-common to sciences are kind of like a chance to think about the time in a different way.
So that's actually kind of a good lead into the amazing collection of works you highlighted in your latest research about attunement in that paper that you shared. And so I'm curious to hear about what you found, but I'm also curious about how that process worked for you. So most researchers have some kind of idea when they start what they're looking for. I'm looking for evidence of this, or I want to explore this phenomena. And at the same time, most researchers get surprised by what they find. Oh, I didn't expect to find this. So I'm curious, when you were looking at these different artists and different approaches to some of these concepts, I'm curious, what was most surprising for you in that work, and what did you find that you did not expect to find?
You're referring to this recent article I shared with you, right? In
Exactly.
particular,
Yeah.
Well, I think I found like really interesting this kind of emerging or interest in the concept of resonance as well. So I think beyond the listening to the environment and being able to grant a voice to the weather and atmosphere, I believe that there's this ongoing. I mean, I would like to develop this further in a next writing. The concept of resonance kind of becomes also a way of thinking across our capabilities to be empathetic with the others, no, and perhaps also resonance can be a key to find this let's say sympathy to ecological systems, no, and it can be a key to become more aware or understand how our environments are changing. And resonance, I mean, it's something that as a phenomenon in music, it's quite common.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about how an instrument can resonate with their body. But also, I mean, we use resonance as a kind of like a empathic term, no? And it can be also a way as kind of thinking of how one can resonate with another person's ideas, or be compassionate, or finding ways of caring as well. So.
And I guess in the physical space, you mentioned that a little bit earlier about that instrument that was designed to resonate with a physical space, not just the bodies. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's an interesting aspect that has this dual signification, the physicality and the emotive or the affective side of resonance. So it is definitely something that could be like a two-sided tool or method that explores, let's say the scientific knowledge, but also our human or organic affective sides.
Okay, great. So that's a perfect segue. One of the questions I'm always interested in asking people that are involved in this kind of work is about sort of levels of communication and understanding with your audiences. So you've talked a lot about connection, attunement, and perception in your performances, and also others' performances and interventions that you looked at. And one of the things I'm always interested in is how important is it for you that audiences really understand your intention with the piece? And by that, I mean, how do you get across that without turning the performance or the installation into a lecture and kind of preserving some of the magic of live performance or an intervention, while at the same time not being so conceptual and so esoteric that audiences have no idea what's going on. So I'm curious sort of how you think about sort of playing within that spectrum and or any sort of techniques you've used to engage with the audience to help them understand what's going on, or even if that's important to you that they understand what's going on.
That's a great question. I've been trying to kind of rehearse or develop or think about ways of working on this performative lecture format where it's both at the same time kind of not just lecturing about sound, but being immersed into the experience and the resonance, and being immersed into these atmospheres and this listening. And well, I think I found this reference at some point from, I think it was a text from Jonathan Stern, who refers to the work of Hildegard Westerkamp. Don't remember right now the title of this sound work, which is kind of very performative at the same time by playing the soundscape of in Vancouver. And kind of like, I think as sound practitioners and researchers, we have perhaps this agency of being able to construct this experience, to highlight the materiability, the malleability, the how sound can become a tool for enriching our like research and description. So I just probably started more or less this year on trying to combine those agencies of trying to clarify on a lecture level my work, but at the same time performing and trying to find these negotiations. And I believe that that's not an easy task, and probably could learn a lot from other performance or stage-oriented artists to find a way. But I'm happy with the with exploration, and it's gratifying to try to find the ways of presenting knowledge in novel ways, in unusual manners.
Right. Okay. So so you mentioned a couple of things that you're working on or you want to pursue further. You mentioned this idea of resonance you'd like to explore further. You talked about sort of this idea of the performative lecture you'd like to explore further. So I'm curious where those ideas are taking you. What's next for you? What are you working on or developing now?
Sure. I'm preparing at the moment is a new version of the Augury installation, which is going to be presented in the Klaipėda Communication Culture Center. It's in Lithuania, and it's kind of like a process of residency and exhibition. And I'm reworking this installation focused more on the meteorological stations that are feeding the actual installation. Last year, I presented this work for the first time, Augury, but I was relying on pre-recorded data from the surrounding spots, surrounding area to the gallery where it was presented in Riga, in Latvia. And I've been interested to think about how would be the experience of listening to real-time data translations. And I'm working with this kind of system that it's a radio channel that is working across 1 kilometer or a couple of kilometers around the gallery. So I want to kind of like extend our listening as sort of like putting ears outside the gallery and being able to have a expanded listening that surround us. And it still is sonification, and still is this kind of a smoke and mirror experience with the obsidian stones and lights and so on. So I believe that I try to experiment more and more with this kind of immersive experience of trying to create a voice to the weather. So I'll keep working on this line for a while, but I'll think about some other projects probably in future when I'm done with my research.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd love to sort of see and hear how that goes, because because I've done pieces previously in Graz, Austria, using air quality data. But as you mentioned, that was downloaded historical data, and then I mean it was only 1 day old, but it was still recorded data translated into sound. So I'm curious, what it would be like with live data. And I've also been experimenting and playing a lot with sensors that are actually on stage in plants with light and temperature and motion and contact microphones and so on. But those are obviously like very, very local, like actually on the table where I'm performing. So yeah, I'm curious your ideas of extending beyond the boundaries, but also into the live data. So yeah, I'd be very curious to see how that goes. And we'll put a link into the show notes of that location, so people can follow that work and follow your work. So as usual, to close the show, we play a performance excerpt, and this time you shared sensoryscapes of Vaccio Vorori, and once again, I hope I pronounced that right. And you described this so I described it as a performance, but you described it as a sonic intervention. So can you set this up for the audience? So what they're going to hear?
Right. Yeah, it's sonic intervention I did in our last residency in Turku in Titanic Gallery. And it's sort of like me taking my laptop and the sensors outside into a park and doing this kind of streaming of more or less what you said, also like taking the sensors in your table, but it's me outside doing this kind of like a recording. And it was back then radio transmission into an online radio platform called Out of Office 000. And so this, the experience we had then. Thank you so much, Steve.
Oh, you're most welcome. Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Juan. And as always, be sure to check the show notes for links to the recordings that we played, to more of Juan's research on writing, and also references to some of the books and authors that Juan mentioned during the talk. So thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, I can't wait to hear what you come up with next.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'll be in contact.
Great. Most welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks for listening to Sustain. Hope to catch you again next time. Be sure to sign up for our email list on our website, sustain.fm. Follow our Instagram, also sustain.fm. You get more info on the radio show, in-person events in different cities, live streams, and more. All right, until next time, see you on the dance floor.